The Roman Empire was an ancient empire that was centralized on the city of Rome and was established in 27 BCE, following the passing of the Roman Republic, and it continued to the Empire of the West in 476 CE. The main emperors who have connotations to art and architecture I will be talking about that were around during the Western Empire are as follows: Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, who helped build the Colosseum; Augustus Caesar, who commissioned the Areopagus; and Domitian, once again, who commissioned the construction of the Arch of Titus. Back during these periods, propaganda was extremely important, and we can see examples of this through the purpose of the Colosseum, Arch of Titus, and Areopagus through their architecture and the emperors who created them. The Colosseum was located in Rome and was the largest functional amphitheater of its time. However, the original name it had was the Flavian Amphitheater. The term Flavian stands for emperors, who were at the time Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, from the Flavian dynasty. It was not called the Colosseum until the medieval period, getting its name due to its proximity to a colossal glided bronze statue of Nero. The Colosseum is located east of the Palatine Hill, Italy. It was built as a mass entertainment venue, often holding many gladiator fights and wild animal hunts. It was even used for staging mock sea battles, as the natural flow of water through the excavated hollow allowed for this. The Colosseum was built between 70 to 80 AD. Prior to the construction of the Colosseum, however, Nero had built the Golden House and an artificial lake after the fire in Rome. Vespasian then decided to return the land that Nero had taken for his own satisfaction and returned it to the Roman people by demolishing the Golden House of Nero. Drainage of the site also had to be arranged before any construction could begin, the structure going down 6.08 meters to a brick pavement. Construction of the Colosseum began sometime between 70 and 72 CE during the ruling of Vespasian. The structure was formally dedicated in 80 CE by Titus, and then it was inaugurated with at least 100 days of games. In 82 CE, Domitian completed the Colosseum by adding the uppermost story. The Colosseum is a freestanding structure. The materials used for the construction of the Colosseum were stones and concrete such as travertine, which had a composite system of barrel vaults and groin vaults that measured around 189 by 156 meters overall, the bottom two levels being built of limestone travertine. The dimensions of the Colosseum are as followed. The arena was 86 times 54 meters, giving it an oval shape. The ground floor arches are 7.05 meters high, the second level is 6.45 meters high, and the third was 6.4 meters high, and the Colosseum can fit 50,000 people in its stadium. On the outside of the Colosseum, the outside ring uses 100,000 cubic meters of uncemented limestone, supported by 300 tons of iron clamps. The base of the Colosseum was 24,000 meters squared. The three arena stories of the Colosseum are surrounded by arcades framed on the exterior by engaged columns in the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders. The arrangement of the rising structure became the basis of the Renaissance codification known as the assemblage of orders, the bottommost column on the bottom story being the Doric, the second the Ionic, and the third Corinthian. The top level has Corinthian pilasters. The columns highlighted the height and contrast with the curve of the arches. Supporting masts extended from corbels built into the Colosseum's top, or attic, and hundreds of Roman sailors were required to manipulate the rigging that extended and retracted the velarium. The architect made extensive use of the arch vault to lighten the load and to spread the stain. 76 out of 80 arches seated as the chief entrances and exits. The way the Romans would enter the Colosseum was through the vomitoria. Some other features of the Colosseum were as follows. Underneath the Colosseum there were many levers, pulleys, and lifts. The area underneath the Colosseum has been excavated to reveal the remains of dens for wild beasts and other features. For spectators' protection against the wild beasts, a fence surrounded the fighting area. The significance of the Colosseum was that the shape that was used on it had been used since 80 BC. Take, for example, the amphitheater in Pompeii. In Rome, an amphitheater was built in the time of Julius Caesar. However, the Colosseum was much larger in sheer size, being the largest of all Roman amphitheaters. The Colosseum was only completed as far as the third level by Vespasian, for he died in 79 CE. It was quickly continued by his son and his successor Titus in 80 to 81 CE. He also built the baths of Titus and the Colosseum. Another reason the Colosseum was so predominant back during ancient Rome is because it served as a tool of political propaganda and social control. The emperors provided free entertainment to placate the masses, distracting them from political affairs. Back during these times, a vast amount of government corruption tended to erupt, such as bribery, fraud, and nepotism. All these qualities were a major reason for the decline of the Roman Empire. Emperor Vespasian realized that Nero had been responsible for a lot of the grief that had been given to the Romans of the time and decided to build the Colosseum in hopes of distracting the Romans of all the politics in exchange for free entertainment and happiness from the events of the Colosseum. Overall, this was well done, as many Romans began to forget about the politics at the time, which gave Vespasian the chance to rehabilitate the corrupted and loathed Roman civilization created by Nero before his rule, thus furthering his expansive influence throughout Rome and passing these qualities down to future successors of the next generation emperors for the success of the next generation emperors for infinite control and influence for the imperials. The Arch of Titus was a triumphal arch located on the Via Sacra close to the Roman Forum in Rome, Italy. The Arch of Titus was designed to glorify the reminiscence of individuals and the actions they did. These monumental arches were also a rendezvous spot for the triumphal processions that occurred in the city to welcome home victorious armies after their campaigns. There were at least 36 of these structures constructed in ancient Rome in the 4th century CE, with the Arch of Titus being the oldest of the 3 surviving examples. The Arch of Titus was built not long after the death of Titus in 81 CE to respect him and was commissioned by Titus's brother, Domitian, who took his place as emperor. The Arch of Titus is embellished by a series of carvings which celebrated Titus's most respected and admired victories, such as the struggle against Jewish rebels that occurred in the capture of Jerusalem in 70 CE. The sculptures display to us is the Roman soldiers carrying off treasure located from the temple. They also have links and references to Titus's deification after his death. In one of the depictions, the new god parades triumphantly in his celestial carriage and is crowned by the goddess of victory for an fold underneath the arch. Titus can be seen ascending into the heavens. This was imperial propaganda, which made Titus seem like a god when he was only merely a human, just as any other Roman was at the time. However, the Arch of Titus helped us to understand some other details of the arch were as follows. Some other details on the Arch of Titus were as follows. Originally on top of the arch there used to be a gliding chariot drawn by 4 horses, also known as a quadriga. There could have been a chance that the chariot may have been drawn by elephants. A large part of the attic and outer part of the piers are 19th century restoration constructed from travertine. The Arch of Titus used to be made from Pentelic marble located near Athens. Spondrils were the rectangular space between one side of the outer curve on an arch and the framework or ceiling. The spondrils on the Arch of Titus have winged women embodying victory. The appearance of the Arch of Titus has changed immensely since Roman times. Originally, there may have been a statue of the emperor on the peak, with additional sculptures on the facades. These were lost in the 11th century, as new structures were added to the top and sides of the arch as it was incorporated into a protective wall. During the year 1812, Giuseppe Valadier undertook a complex restoration of the site. During this occurrence, the arch was completely dismantled and reassembled with travertine used to show fixed portions and a new inscription added. The vault was also decorated with coffers sculpted with simple architectural moldings and rosettes. I will now be talking about the propaganda linked to the Arch of Titus. The arch is patched along the sacred way, for it was made to be walked under. Both panels on the arch's wall would show movement in the same directions a triumph would process. It made sense for Titus's procession to be displayed along this road. It also made sense that there were major relief panels inside the arch, to be seen by anyone in subsequent triumphs, further emphasizing the greatness of the Flavians. This was reinforced by the gods, as they had the divine approval of the gods who were with Titus. The divinities formed the idea virtuous and qualities of the emperor, including virtus and victoria. This further reinforced how imperial power was indoctrinated to the people of ancient Roman civilization, which was necessary for the higher-ups to display to be able to easily control the masses during these times. Life as a Roman person during these times who could watch the ceremonies at the Arch of Titus would be formal and convincing of imperial power. They would have glorified any empress part of the ceremony and would understand the significance and power of the depictions of those who had fallen in the Arch of Titus without a second thought, further showing the ultimate authority the higher-ups had during these times. The Areopagus, built by the Emperor Augustus Caesar in 13 to 9 BC, was a shrine consisting of a marble altar wall that was enclosed, constructed in Rome's Campus Martius, Field of Mars, in honor of the Emperor Augustus, and was dedicated in January the 30th, 9 BCE. This dedication was recorded within Ovid's Fasti as well as by Augustus himself in his Register Divi Augusti, Achievement of the Divine Augustus. The purpose of the altar of the Augustan peace was to commemorate the return of Augustus from the western provinces of Spain and Gaul, where he had been busy establishing the provinces since 16 BC, ordered by the Senate on the 4th of July, 13 BC, and inaugurated on January the 30th, 9 BC. The significance of both the mythological and historical reliefs give a conspicuous message, echoed in the altar's title. A new age of peace and fertility had been injected into Rome by Augustus, for it was an optimistic message. This emphasized that Augustus brought peace through war. Livy, a Roman historian around when Augustus was alive, informs us how Romulus closed the gates of Janus, which is an allusion of Augustus who closed the gates of Janus 3 times. Depicted on the eastern wall was Roma, the armed goddess seated at peace. She was dressed as an Amazon with a helmet and one breast bare. Despite the lack of remnants and evidence, the scene had been recreated by ethnographic comparisons to source from the same time. There were two other figures present balancing the teller's scene, possibly Honus and Virtus. Roma also sat with weapons in an attitude of peace. At the time, she is prepared for war. However, the very name Areopagus itself implies peace and prosperity, which flourishes under a triumphant Rome. The Pax Romana was established through Rome's empire. Elaborate floral design with acanthus plants, the swans, are also predominant, as they were the symbol of Apollo, the god of whom Augustus honored with his victory at Actium. The interior of the walls had an upper and lower section. The upper section symbolized sacrifice, garlands, liberation, and skulls. The lower section had a marble design representing the temporary wooden structure erected before the altar was finished. I will now talk about the propaganda linked to the Areopagus. It was not a new idea for someone from Rome to publicize his own achievements. However, what is significant is the scale on which Augustus does it. He made the Areopagus revolve around the peace and tranquility he had installed upon ancient Rome at the time to seem as if he was a god or savior that saved everyone from all the hardships in ancient times. This was apparent as we could see Augustus' vision for conveying peace to the Romans after they had just fought in the Civil War. He also depicted Roma in a grand state of peace. This was to symbolize the peace of the Roman people of the time, even if that was not true. This was done to maintain order and atmosphere of the kingdom at the time, for this peace was in place to make the civilians forget about negative qualities of the war, and to heighten Augustus' glorification, which in the end showed his ultimate imperial power and control across Rome. Thank you for listening.